Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hobby Homestead. Today is a day for potting up seedlings. I have a bunch of different pots, and I'm going to talk you through my process when I pot things up, when I don't pot them up, when I just wait, and how I pot up most of my seedlings. If you're new here, my name is Amy, and I am gardening, suburban homesteading in Zone 6A in Ontario, Canada. Our last frost date is not until early to mid-May, and so we still have about a month before our frost tender plants like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants and nasturtiums, and I'm looking at the plants that I have out here right now, basil. All these things have to wait for another 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks. It's all weather dependent, right? And some of them are getting a little bit big. You can see I've got some tomatoes. A lot of my tomatoes like these I started later, but I did start some early thinking I could keep these better protected. If I just have a couple, I could start them early and then I can keep them protected from the cold weather. So these are like my early ones. These are in soil blocks and they have grown nice and tall, but they're starting to struggle because this is all the soil they have to work with and they dry out faster that way. So I'm going to be potting these big guys up into potentially these bags. I got these a few years ago. I don't know where you can buy them now, aside from a large online shopping place that I don't recommend anybody buy from anymore. Starts with an A. So I'm not sure where to get these. Essentially, it's just a fabric grow bag. I like that it sort of allows for air pruning, where the roots are exposed to air on the outsides, which means you don't get coiling of roots around and around and around. So for things that grow fairly quickly, like my tomatoes, they do well in here. I found last year my peppers did well in here because they had to stay in pots until almost June because our weather was so cold last spring. So things like this are good for plants that are going to stay in pots, not transplanted outside for longer. And in a climate like this, where we have a later last frost date, colder spring, that is often the case. Things have to stay in pots for a lot longer. If you don't have something that allows you to air prune the roots, that's totally fine. You can pot up anything into anything, really, as long as there's drainage. And so these are just like flimsy pots that I would have purchased plants from a garden center in a long time ago. A lot of the times those pots just fall apart instantly, or by the second year they're already trash. So I do like to use sturdier pots. I do use the bootstrap farmer pots like this because they will last a long time. These have been going for about 5-6 years now and they're still going strong. But you can use anything. You can use cream cartons, milk cartons. If you buy like concentrated juice, you could use those containers. You can use anything as long as you can make drainage holes in the bottom. And it's the same with starting the seeds. You can use anything. You can make your own newspaper pots or paper towel roll pots. You can also pot up baby seedlings as they grow into larger DIY and recycling bin containers as well. You don't need anything fancy. I'm just showing you what I'm using. And the reason you want to pot up is just like I said, this little tomato is going to start to struggle in here because there's not much soil left as this little guy grows into a big guy. They still need nutrients and they need to be able to hold on to moisture. So we want to be able to give them a little bit more soil to grow onto so they keep growing big and strong. And by the time you actually get to put them outside, they are nice and strong. I just clipped off the cotyledons there, which are the baby seed leaves. You don't really have to do that. This one actually started to struggle when it dried out, so I'm going to actually pick off those leaves as well. Now this is specific to tomatoes, but, well, not just tomatoes, but for our purposes here, you can plant tomatoes right up until these leaves, so you can bury them completely down in this pot. In fact, I could even use a deeper pot and this would be fine, and I will. They'll grow roots along the stem, and it actually helps them become a stronger plant because they get a larger root mass before they go into the garden. So I'm going to use this bag. I'm just going to put a little bit of soil in the bottom here. And then I'm going to plunk this seedling in. Don't mix up your tags if you've labeled your plants, if you're growing different varieties. One of the things that stops me from potting up is the lack of space. When you're starting out with your little baby seedlings, you've just sown the seeds, you can fit so many little seedlings onto a single tray or under a single grow light. But as those grow, they get bigger and bigger, obviously, and the containers that you're going to need for them get bigger and bigger. So if they're starting to struggle in their tiny little pots or in their tiny little root soil blocks, then you're going to have to pot them into something bigger that takes more soil and more space. And that can be a challenge when you're starting seeds just inside your living space. Maybe it's your kitchen, maybe it's your living room, your basement, your home office. My seedlings are in my living room / home office. There's a lot going on there. And so it just gets really crowded really fast. So I will pot up my seedlings if they are struggling. They're showing signs that they're running out of soil, they're running out of nutrients. Or if I'm having trouble keeping them watered because they dry out so fast because there's too many roots for the amount of soil around them, then I will pot them up into bigger pots. Sometimes I'm stingy with it and I go as small of an increment as possible. I'll take a pot from like one like this to one like this. So a 2-inch pot to a 3.5-inch pot, really not much difference there, but it's just enough to squeak by for a little bit longer and keep that plant relatively happy. Other times, if I know they're going to grow so fast and I don't want to be repotting all the time, I'll just leap up to the largest size that it's going to need. I am putting this tag in here. This is the Honey Drop cherry tomato, and I'm going to need something to put all of these on. I need another tray. All right, you can see this takes up just so much more space than was required before. And I have to go through all of these tomatoes. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 50. There are 50 plants in here that have to go into pots. Now these ones, I'll put them into this size or even a little bit smaller for now. I actually was really late on starting my tomatoes this year, except for these, which I purposely started just a handful really early because I like to be able to get some tomatoes producing early. Despite risk of frost and the fact I'm going to have to baby them outside. But I did start them late, mostly because I was sick and then I was busy. And then I started a bunch and they didn't germinate, which is really weird for tomatoes. And there's a couple of reasons why I think that happened. I'm not going to get into it here. Anyway, we're late this year. I can't believe my tomatoes are this tiny and it is April, but it is what it is. So oddly enough, I'm going to get away with only potting up these tomatoes one time. Typically, if I start my tomatoes in mid-March and they can't go out till mid-May, I am potting them up at least twice, which is kind of a pain in the butt. The upside to starting them late is that I don't have to pot up very much, if at all. The downside to starting them late is that I'm not going to get a harvest off of these until the end of the summer, which stinks, but it is what it is. All right, so I better keep going with these. This is a really nice finding. I've just pulled my first tomato seedling out of this tray of soil blocks. I've had a rough start with soil blocks this year. It's my first year doing it. And I found that it made my fungus gnat problem worse. So I've had fungus gnats. What they do is they lay their eggs in the moist soil and then the eggs hatch and eventually those larvae will eat the roots of your little seedlings. I lost a couple trays of cauliflower and broccoli to that earlier in the season. I have been doing all the things. I've been doing nematodes. I've been doing BTI in the form of mosquito dunks, watering with that every time. I keep fans on them all the time. I was covering everything with vermiculite, but it just wasn't working. And the thing is, with soil blocks, you can cover the top with vermiculite or sand because fungus gnats apparently don't like to lay their eggs in that material. They just want moist soil. But with blocks, I had these big trays with open sides. And so every time you water a soil block, all outside exposed soil is moist and you can't easily cover that. Whereas if you water inside a pot, you can like bottom water the pot and the water soaks up and only the soil down inside here is moist. And so the top layer can stay dry. That is a pro for using pots. But having licked the fungus gnats in this tray, at least, these seedlings are healthy now. I can see the benefits to soil blocks right here. This is a tomato seedling and its roots are very happy, very healthy. This is only, when did I sow these? Maybe 2 weeks old, this seedling right here. And the roots are just full throughout here and they're coming out of the block, but then they're stopping. If you grow in pots and you leave them too long without potting up, the roots can end up swirling around and around looking for a place to go. And that's when you get what's called a root-bound seedling. The roots just are bound up inside this pot. And then when you transplant it, you can like tickle the roots and kind of break them apart to encourage them to grow out. But that seedling then is more inclined to keep twirling its roots, and it has a harder time spreading its roots out into the soil. Soil blocks are supposed to be a great solution to that. And finally, I am seeing that benefit here. These roots are air pruning. So as soon as they reach the outside of the block, they stop growing, but they'll thicken up on the inside. It'll have a thick root structure inside this block, but they're not going to end up coiling around and around. However, I am potting this up into a pot because I currently have no way to up block beyond this 2-inch block. They do sell 4-inch soil blockers, and you can just grab a ball of soil and push it against here to make this bigger, but I want them to fit uniformly on a tray, and those big like handmade balls just are going to take up too much space, kind of like these giants here. So as beautiful as these soil blocks are, as well as they've done these tomato plants, I am going to pot into just small pots just to give them a little bit more room, because we only have like another month and then they can go outside. Maybe not the tiny pots. Changing my mind as I go. I'm going to use these pots. And I am discarding extras in some cases. It's always a risk, because what if some of them die? But I just don't have enough pots or space to save all of my double sown seedlings that came up as doubles. Got some tomatoes potted up here, and still some that are tiny enough they can wait a little bit longer. On the end I have some Malabar spinach, and very annoyingly I can't fit a 4th pot of Malabar spinach on the same tray, but it is what it is. I'm going to set this somewhere. Oh boy. One of my favorite things to do with my seedlings as I'm potting up is to give them some outside time, even if it's well before the last frost. Now, of course, this is weather dependent, and you want to properly harden off any seedlings, slowly get them acclimated to the outdoors. But it's 21 degrees Celsius today, which is unseasonably warm, and it's going to stay this way for the next 2 weeks. And as far as I know, we're also supposed to have overnight temperatures that are unseasonably warm, like above 10 degrees Celsius for the next little while. So while carefully watching that forecast, I am going to leave these freshly potted up and need to be potted up seedlings outside in a covered space for now while they acclimate. I keep them out of direct sun at first. But it's warm, rainy, and overcast this week, all week. It's perfect. So it just gives me a little bit of flexibility here. I can pot up. They take up more space, yes, but I don't have to get them all inside under the grow lights all right away. And what I can do if I run out of space inside is leave them outside for as much time as I can. But even if I have to haul them inside overnight or for the odd cold day, for the most part, these can actually sit outside, as long as, like with tomatoes, if it's above 15 degrees Celsius, they're happy outside. So that's also part of my plan, to make room for all these things as they get potted up and become huge. It's just leave them outside for as much time as possible, knowing that given the weather, I may still have to haul them back in. The other things I'm going to be potting up right now are, where do I start? These nasturtiums. I have a bunch of nasturtiums in these tiny little pots. They need to be potted up desperately. And my marigolds are about to bloom, which is lovely. And they're actually okay right now in this size pot. This is a 3.5-inch pot. I sowed these, I wrote it down somewhere, March 4th. So it has been a little over a month since I sowed these seeds. That checks out. You shouldn't really have to pot up seedlings for most medium growing plants within a month. It's usually like around 5 to 6 weeks where they start to be able to benefit. Some of the really slow growing things, you don't even have to worry about potting up for like 8 weeks. I'm going to leave these. This is enough room for these marigolds right now. I may want to feed them, and I'm going to want to make sure they don't dry out. As the plants get bigger, the roots get bigger and thirstier, and you need to make sure you're keeping them watered more often because there's not as much soil there to hold on to the moisture. The roots are all throughout it. But I am going to leave these for now, mostly because I'm short on time and patience. Other things I have to pot up include, oh boy, yeah, my cucamelon. The cucamelons are vining all over everything. So when I pot these up, oh, they're unhappy. I'm also going to add a little bit of a trellis, just some chopsticks or something, and wrap them around. I do that with my loofahs, and it makes them just a little bit less unruly when they're in a tray with a bunch of other things. These are getting potted up next. And eggplant and celery, I have a whole tray with these little 2.5-inch pots. They're going to need to be potted up to something bigger. On that note of leaving those marigolds in there and just instead of potting up, making sure that they are fed, I might add some fish emulsion, very diluted, to those just because they're flowering now and they're big. Typically, I don't worry about feeding my seedlings. I just give them good soil with compost, worm castings, that kind of thing. Along that note, there are reasons why I would choose to not pot up a seedling. And one is if it is going to move outside in the next 2 weeks or less. So with cold weather things, this is all warm weather crops. Some cold ones here. So I have this absolutely ridiculous soil block with like 6 kale plants in it, and one is growing out of the bottom. It's just, this is a ridiculous block full of plants. I need to plant this outside very soon. I can't plant it out yet because it is actually going in a very exciting new garden that we're putting in, a little community help yourself garden on our boulevard. I have some sprout boxes arriving this week. So once I get those filled, I can get these kale in there. I'm not going to pot them up because they only have another like maximum 5 days in this block. And yes, they're very sad in here, but they'll be okay. They'll survive. Kale is pretty hard to stunt. Like it'll struggle, but it'll bounce back again. So in cases like this, it's got like a week left. It'll be okay. Sometimes you just have to make a judgment call, and experience helps make that. One way you could avoid potting up is if you plant your seeds in a larger pot to begin with. There are risks associated with that. And that's mostly just that the soil becomes waterlogged because there aren't enough roots in there to absorb all the moisture that that soil can hold. So you end up with root rot. And it's just, it unnecessarily takes up a whole bunch of space that you don't need to take up right away. So you can do that. Just make sure it is very well draining soil if you're going to sow a seed in a large container. And then you don't have to pot up. You just let it grow and grow and grow and grow. That is definitely an option. Just watch for waterlogged soil. I actually have a whole pile of seeds here. This is one of my other mid-April tasks. So I still have a good sized stack of seeds to sow in pots indoors. These will not have to be potted up because our last frost is only about a month away. So they'll be in pots for maximum 5 weeks. And they'll still be small enough they can be in their original pots. So if you start seedlings later, you don't necessarily have to pot them up if it's close enough to your last frost date. And then the seeds that you would direct sow in your garden that don't require pots at all. Some common ones for me would be peas. I do start some inside, but they also are a great one to direct sow. Any cold hardy greens, pretty much all the greens. So you can direct sow things like kale, which I just showed you. I started inside because it's a little slower growing. But lettuces, spinach, arugula, all those things, they are cold hardy. You can sow the seeds outside now in April. Even if your last frost isn't until mid-May, you can sow them out now as soon as the ground is workable. Radishes, beets, carrot, turnips, rutabagas, parsnips are a good one. Also alliums. So you can direct sow onions, although they're slow. So you might want to do onion sets at this time of year, where you buy like a little mini bulb that's growth has been halted. Then you plant it outside and it keeps growing. You can do those right away. You can direct sow things like leeks. So those are seeds that you can definitely put outside, and you will never have to pot up because the seed goes in the place where they're going to stay forever. But if you are starting in pots and you have already started a whole batch of seedlings prior to this date, if you started seedlings in March or maybe even February, it's a good idea to check them over, make sure that they're healthy and thriving and they're not crowded in little pots. If they look like they need some more space, if the leaves are yellowing, the soil's drying too quickly and leaves are getting crispy, it's probably a good idea to give them another size pot to grow into over the next month before they can go outside. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's time for me to get going on some more potting up. I have to get this tray out of the way and start up with some flowers and herbs and other things, cucamelons, all these things that need bigger pots. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please subscribe to my channel. The Hobby Homestead is a small business and we're just trying to make ends meet here, and YouTube is an important part of that business plan. So the more subscribers, the better off I can be here and the more content I can make. Also, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I hope that you'll come and grow with us.